An elderly woman named Helga has dementia and loves to knit while watching TV quietly. But a noise coming from the ventilation duct scares her. So she calls the fumigator. He asks for your name and address. With dementia, Helga reads this information on a piece of paper. Shortly after, the fumigator, Frank, arrives. As he approaches Helga's apartment, Frank notices a foul-smelling liquid coming out of the duct and hears a noise. After knocking on the door, Helga opens it, but forgets that she called Frank and that there was a noise. Frank hears the sound and Helga lets him in. Frank goes to investigate and finds a trail of blood. He follows him and finds another pest control agent bleeding inside the duct. Hearing a small noise, Frank turns around and then screams when he sees something hurling at him. Helga hears Frank's scream and sees him crawling out, only to be pulled back inside. With dementia, Helga forgets what she just saw and goes back to knitting and watching TV, while poor Frank is dragged into the duct. Again, Helga hears a noise and calls another fumigator. 4 days earlier, a fireball is launched from space to Earth. She ends up in New York, breaks the window of a warehouse and falls inside a playhouse. It is an egg from which a small spider emerges. Soon after, Helga's granddaughter Charlotte sneaks into the warehouse to steal a doll and post it on Instagram. At that moment, she finds the spider on the back of her hand. Upon hearing someone approaching, Charlotte empties a matchbox, hides the spider inside it, and exits through the duct. Helga's sister enters the room to see if there is anyone there. Seeing the hole in the window, Gunther despairs and runs out of the room. Charlotte crawls back down the duct. She watches Gunther scolding her stepfather Ethan. She accuses Charlotte of breaking into the warehouse. Annoyed, Ethan decides to confront his stepdaughter. Before her stepfather notices her absence, Charlotte rushes to her room and hides the spider in a jar. Ethan enters and asks if she has been to Gunther's apartment. Charlotte lies and says no. The two don't get along very well. Ethan tells her to just stay away from Gunther, but is interrupted by a call from Sandy, from the publisher, about the comic book she is working on. Charlotte takes a picture of the spider, calls it Sting, and posts the image on Instagram. At this point, her mother Heather asks her to take care of Liam, her half-brother on Ethan's side, while she goes to work at her desk. With her mother busy, Charlotte gets bored and starts taking care of the spider. In addition to being a comic book artist, Ethan also works part-time as a janitor for the building to help with expenses. While repairing the pipes in a neighbor's apartment, a cockroach falls on his face, startling him. After the service ends, the owner of the apartment, Maria, comes to congratulate him. She is a widow and also lost her 2 children. She tells Ethan that he should be grateful to still have his family. While Charlotte feeds Sting a cockroach, Ethan repairs the heater in the basement and takes out the trash. After a day of work, Ethan returns to take care of his young son, Liam, while Heather goes to check on his mother Helga, who watches TV along with her aunt Gunther. While Heather covers her mother with the blanket, Helga tells Heather that she made a moth sweater for Charlotte. With dementia, Helga then tells Heather, her daughter, that she should meet her daughter before she falls asleep. Ethan is busy working on his new comic book. He also does his best to bond with his stepdaughter and asks her to look at a character he just drew, a teacher based on Charlotte's father. The two share a moment together watching the cartoon, but Heather interrupts them, asks Charlotte to set the dinner table, and thanks Ethan for being so affectionate to Charlotte. Soon after, Ethan goes to Charlotte's room to put her to bed, but she is not there. He sees a sketch of a giant spider and the pot where Sting is. Before he can see Sting, Charlotte interrupts him. Ethan covers her with the blanket and says goodnight. While Charlotte sleeps soundly, Sting silently opens the jar and crawls into the duct. Gunther's parrot sees Sting coming out of the vent and tries to alert the sleeping Gunther. The next morning, the family has breakfast. Charlotte tries to talk to Ethan and his mother, but they don't listen to her, as they are too busy talking about work and responsibilities. Frustrated, Charlotte leaves angry. Ethan asks Heather when she will tell Charlotte that her father has been back in town for 6 months. He never showed up to see his daughter. Heather assures Ethan that she will tell Charlotte when the time comes. She also asks Ethan to take care of their son, Liam, while she dedicates herself to work. Soon after, the family continues with its daily routine and everyone takes care of their tasks. At that moment, a scream from Gunther is heard coming from upstairs. Ethan goes to check and finds Gunther's parrot dead, skinned and attached to the cage. Gunther asks Ethan to call Frank, the fumigator. Frank arrives to investigate the scene. He thinks that the one that killed the parrot is small and came through the pipeline, so he decides to smoke the entire building to kill whatever it is that killed the parrot. Meanwhile, Charlotte brings Sting a bag full of cockroaches to feed him. She whistles at him, and Sting mimics the whistle, which means she is hungry. A mothball accidentally rolls into the pot. Sting is startled, but calms down when Charlotte removes the mothballs. It turns out that the mothball can melt Sting's web, which is why mothballs are your worst enemy. Sting has also grown in size, which Charlotte finds amazing. After Frank sprays the entire building, he makes his way to Ethan's apartment. Just as he is about to spray Charlotte's room, she tells him not to do it. She doesn't want the pesticide to hurt her spider. Frank advises her to get a dog and get rid of the spider. According to him, everything the spiders know how to do. Later that night, Maria dozes off watching TV. Your dog senses something in the ventilation duct and starts barking loudly, waking Maria drunk from sleep. Annoyed, Maria expels the dog and goes to take her medicine. Completely oblivious to the fact that Sting is sneaking up on her, Maria looks at a picture with her late husband and their 2 children. Just when she gets emotional, Sting jumps on her and pokes her on the cheek, causing her to fall and hit the back of her head hard. Maria runs to the bathroom to see her face and notices that her cheek is swelling and turning purple. She vomits before passing out and hitting her head on the edge of the tub. Mary can't move anything but her eyes. Sting enters through her mouth to end it all. With Sting getting bigger, Charlotte visits Eric to borrow an aquarium. He is a biology student who experiments with animals in his apartment. Charlotte asks Eric to take a look at Sting. When Charlotte whistles at him, Sting mimics her whistling, amazed. Eric says that this is not a spider because spiders do not have vocal cords. Charlotte replies that he is no ordinary spider and feeds him a cockroach, which Eric thinks is cool. Charlotte then shows him how big Sting is. Eric asks Charlotte to leave him with Sting until he finds a safe aquarium. He needs to make sure Sting doesn't run away. Charlotte agrees and asks Eric not to let Ethan find out about their deal. Meanwhile, Heather and Ethan are arguing, but a noise coming from inside the duct interrupts them. Ethan goes to check, but is startled when something runs towards him, causing him to fall to the ground. It's just Maria's dog. To return the dog, Ethan knocks on Maria's door, but no one answers. Then he opens the door with the master key and enters, finding Mary's body. He calls the police and tells them about what happened. While answering some questions for the policeman, a call from Eric interrupts him, asking him to come to his apartment immediately. At Eric's apartment, Ethan finds out about Sting. Eric tells him that it is a venomous spider. It could be a killer, and Charlotte is raising it as a pet. Eric suggests calling the Department of Health and Safety, since Sting is quite large and venomous. Eric goes on to show Ethan Sting's size, which terrifies him. Ethan confronts Charlotte for creating a poisonous spider as a pet. Annoyed, Charlotte rushes to Eric's apartment to get Sting back, but Eric ignores her. Charlotte scolds Ethan for letting Eric stay with Sting. She also says that Ethan's comics suck, as he killed off her favorite character, who was based on her father. Charlotte believes that her father is in Thailand, and says that he is much better than Ethan. Ethan then reveals the truth. Charlotte's father has been back in town for 6 months, but has never been to visit her. Upon hearing this, Charlotte is devastated and locks herself in her room. Heather scolds Ethan for destroying Charlotte's image of her father and for shaking her confidence, reminding him that it was never his decision to tell her. Instead of turning Sting over to the Department of Health and Safety, Eric decides to keep him and feed him larger animals. For selfish reasons, Eric wants Sting to grow as much as possible. While Eric sleeps soundly, Sting grows so large that he manages to break the huge aquarium. Meanwhile, Ethan repairs the heater. He receives a voicemail from Sandy, from the publisher. She says that his comics are not working. This angers Ethan. He loses control and takes it out on the heater. Gunther enters and scolds Ethan for being clumsy. She promises to fire him early next month. Ethan asks why she hates him so much. Gunther calls him a weak man, who runs away when the going gets tough. She also promises to do her best to keep him away from her niece. This leaves Ethan speechless and very shaken. Gunther returns to his apartment. She tries to call her cat, but he doesn't show up. While watching TV with her sister, she hears the cat's meow. Upon checking, Gunther finds the ventilation duct open. Hearing the cat's meow coming from the duct, Gunther crawls inside, but his flashlight fails. At that moment, Sting jumps on her and drags her inside. As time goes on, Ethan becomes increasingly frustrated with his life. While repairing the TV cable, he gets a slight electric shock. He loses control and punches the screen, scaring the children. Heather tells Charlotte to take her brother to the other room while she confronts Ethan about what just happened. Charlotte puts on her headphones and watches some videos on her cell phone, while Heather and Ethan argue. At this moment, Sting attacks them, paralyzes them both, and drags them away. Focused on her cell phone, Charlotte doesn't realize what just happened. When she sees Maria's dog barking, she thinks he is hungry and goes to the kitchen to get food for him. Completely oblivious to the fact that Sting is dragging his stepfather into the duct. Even so, the dog continues to bark. Charlotte examines the apartment and panics when she realizes that her mother and stepfather have disappeared. She finds the duct open, where Sting is dragging his stepfather to. Not knowing what is happening, Charlotte tries to ask for help, but there is no internet. She goes into despair. He tries to leave the apartment, but the windows and door are locked. The dog also disappeared. Charlotte is startled to realize that this is all Sting's work and blocks the open duct to ensure that he does not come back to take her as well. However, Sting appears from behind, kidnaps his little brother Leon, and escapes through another duct. Charlotte yells at Sting, asking for her brother back. She begins to regret taking Sting home. With no other choice but to fight him, Charlotte dons her moth sweater. She takes her water gun and fills it with mothball water. Moths are Sting's greatest enemy. Charlotte goes to Eric's apartment in hopes of getting help, but she is shocked to find him tied to the ceiling with Sting's web. Charlotte then goes to check on her grandmother. She tries to call the police on the landline, but there is no signal. Charlotte tells her grandmother to keep the moth cottage nearby to make sure Sting doesn't attack her. Finding more mothballs in Helga's apartment, Charlotte prepares more mothball water and wets herself with it before heading out in search of Sting. Ethan tries to free himself from Sting's web, but ends up burning his hand. Upon hearing Ethan's screams, Charlotte finally finds him and frees him from the web. At that moment, Frank, the fumigator, arrives after Helga called him because of the noise. As Ethan is about to exit the duct, he hears Liam's voice. Charlotte tells him not to rush. Out of nowhere, Sting appears to attack them. They end up falling into the trash can in the basement. Charlotte loses consciousness for a moment. She opens her eyes and sees Sting towering over her, but Ethan saves her in time and chases Sting away with mothball water. Her stepdaughter, who begins to cry, regretting having had a poisonous spider as a pet and realizing the lives her pet took. Ethan comforts her, says it's not her fault, and assures her that they will fight to the end. At that moment, Sting throws Frank into the trash room. Frank scolds Charlotte for keeping that spider as a pet. Wanting to get out of there, Frank tries to open the back door, but it is locked. He attacks Ethan and demands the key, but all Ethan has is a bottle of mothball water to defend himself from Sting. Frank picks it up and pours some on himself, but Ethan reminds him that this is the only weapon they have against Sting. Frank grabs his nail gun and decides to confront Sting with it. As Sting bursts into the duct, Frank screams in horror and shoots randomly. He fails to hit Sting and accidentally triggers the sprinklers. The water that comes out washes away the mothballs they had thrown on themselves, leaving them vulnerable to Sting's attacks. At that instant, Sting throws his web at Frank, pulls him into the vent, and blows his head off, traumatizing Ethan and Charlotte. The two run to the trash compactor, where they find Heather and Liam tied up with Sting's web. Ethan melts the web with the remaining mothball water. He hugs his wife and son, and Charlotte joins them, realizing how much she loves them. Sting appears and crawls towards the family. Ethan tries to close the compactor door to crush it, but the door won't move because it's off. Ethan tries to reach the shot, while Charlotte does her best to restrain Sting. Sting pushes Charlotte and moves closer to finish off the entire family. Charlotte presses the button and closes the compactor door, crushing Sting and ending the threat. Heather drags Ethan out of the compactor. Charlotte calls Ethan Dad, says she loves him, and hugs him. Having survived this traumatic experience, the family shares a warm embrace. Little do they know, however, about the pile of spider eggs that have yet to hatch. And so, the story ends.